Yep.
All right, so now we can officially begin our webinar for the day. My name is Ryan Coe, and I am the president of the Religion Communicators Council. And we are very, very pleased to have Mr. Casey Boggs with us today. Just for a word of background as to who we are as an organization, the Religion Communicators Council was founded in 1929 and is an association of communications professionals who work for and with a diverse group of faith-based organizations. One of the things that we really pride ourselves on, and I've mentioned this to Casey as well, is the fact that we truly are an interfaith organization. We have everything from Eastern religions to the panoply of Christian religions. It's really to all the Abrahamic faiths. It really is a great organization, a great truly interfaith organization. Um, the other thing that we really pride ourselves is that we kind of span the focus of communications professions. So we have public relations people, we have advertising development people, um, we have people who represent their faith publicly in other fora. And so the RCC provides opportunities for all of these groups to learn from each other, to get best practices, to hone our crafts, whatever they may be. We really try to promote excellence in the communication of faith and values in the public arena and encourage understanding among religious and faith groups. Just a quick word too for anybody that is on this call who has not entered the DeRose Hinkhouse Awards. Our in-house awards, the DeRose Hinkhouse Awards, the deadline for that is on Saturday. And so I would encourage anybody who hasn't entered to go ahead and enter those. Like I said, we're very, very pleased to have Mr. Casey Boggs with us today. He is the President and Chief Reputation Officer of Reputation. Pardon me, is it Reputation US or Reputation Us?
Reputation Us, or you can call us US, call us whatever you want, but
Uh,
Reputation Us.
and he is the founder and president of Reputation Us. Before forming this group, Casey was the president of LT Public Relations, directing the strategic communications efforts for corporations, financial institutions, and public sector clients. Prior to that, he served as public relations director at AIG, leading the public relations efforts of 6 affiliated companies, also managing the accounts for two of the world's largest public relations firms, Wagner, Edstrom, and Weber Shandwick. Clients of his included Microsoft, JP Morgan, Bank of America, Credit Suisse, and Allstate. And he was also a broadcast buyer for the national advertising agency Hal Rennie and Partners. So vast array of background and experience that we have with Mr. Casey Boggs today. Um, but today specifically, we're going to talk about reputation management and in particular, reputational risks. How to mitigate crisis situations and what it does to your reputation. And but in light of Casey's, expertise in reputation management, I do have a question to start us out with. So Casey was very, very kind and posted his participation in this webinar on LinkedIn. And one of the comments on LinkedIn was, "It's great to see what a former 49er linebacker can do." And I hadn't seen anything about that piece of background. So I'm curious. I did a search, right? Like Casey Boggs linebacker, and I couldn't find anything. So I'm like, is this actually, did this actually happen? Or is this somebody trying to affect your reputation online? And is it something that has to be answered to?
Well, thanks for doing the search for online for a linebacker, Casey Boggs. I'm not sure if anyone's ever done that before, but so I played football back in the day and went to a school in Southern California, Long Beach State, California State University of Long Beach. Coincidentally, their names are the 49ers, not to
Ah,
be mistaken for the San Francisco 49ers.
yeah. Well, then you
So
said
that's
you
probably
said
where the
in the Bay
confusion is.
Area too. So I'm
That
like, maybe
is,
there's
that's
some truth
true.
to this.
Unlike the San Francisco 49ers, which took place in 1849, Long Beach State was founded in 1949, which is where they got their name. So now you know. Yeah. So that's where the name come from.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, so you did play football,
I did.
not
I
at that
did.
level. Makes sense. But as much as you want us to like hype up your reputation, we can do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at any rate, so I will turn the time over to Mr. Casey Boggs, who has a presentation for us, and then we'll have some time for Q&A afterwards.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Ryan and Jeannie, and also Kathy for introducing us to the RCC. It's been a great journey so far to learn more about you and all that you're doing. So far be it from me to tell communicators how to communicate better, so I'll refrain. But part of this presentation is to give you some nuggets of information, and I really do encourage questions. So if there's questions, put in the chat or just throw something at the screen. I'll do my best to chime in to that end. So I really do want to get as much engagement as possible. So I will share a presentation. Give me a quick thumbs up if you guys can see this, okay? Okay, great. So we're going to talk about the crisis risks and crisis leadership in a polarized environment. And let's see if I can turn the page here. Yeah, so the flight plan, as I like to call it, we're going to talk about reputation and the brand and kind of distinguishing between the two. And then really what are the reputational issues that you are dealing with from a crisis side, from a religion side, from a faith-based organization. Did some research before our meeting to find out what we're up against, right? And then we're going to look at two things: how you can play offense with your reputation and how you can play defense. So I'll break those down with this fun little acronym, STEWARD. It's the STEWARD framework, both from a positive side and from a potentially negative side. And again, questions throughout. If there's things that are there, and if I miss a question, Ryan, if you don't mind, just maybe pinging me that a question came in, okay? So Ryan's already gave me the hype here, but I do want to start out by saying I am a recovering journalist. I did start my career in NPR and then NBC down in Southern California. Now, the reason why I bring this up primarily is because as journalists, you see the world from a different prism. Reputation and public relations that we're in, we're working in the best interest of our readership, our viewership, and we're almost the conduit to tell the story, right? We're storytellers. So it's really important to know I see the world and our team sees the world from that aspect. So most of my team here, we have 14 at ReputationUS, we're recovering journalists. And our idea is we're going to ask better questions. We're going to listen to what's going on, what are the sentiments, what are the issues that are facing our target audience. So that's really what reputation is all about. So quick tutorial, at least from our vantage point, is distinguishing between brand and reputations, because many times they're almost used interchangeably, but we're going to tell you today that they're not. So for our purpose today, brand and reputation are different. Brand is what you say about your organization, about your faith-based organization. So you should spend a lot of time on understanding your brand and make sure that everything from how it's being personified to messaging, the communications, logo, website, spend some time on your brand. But we're not going to talk about brand today. We're going to talk about reputation. Reputation, conversely, is what other people say about you or don't say about you, or the misperceptions. And that's important. That's important. Reputation is something you want to put your ear to the ground and listen. Within the organization, from your staffing to your congregation, or just generally talking about faith-based organizations, from within inside your faith-based organization, what's being said, to outside. What are the perceptions? What are the issues? It's really a listening exercise more than anything else. So if I throw out the word reputation, this level sets us a little bit, okay? And then we'll talk about crisis. Now, there's no shortage of this these days. We are kept very much employed because of crisis. But I want to emphasize that today reputation is a full contact sport. You want to play offense and defense. And Ryan, this is where my football playing days are going to come into play here. We want to play offense and defense, right? And so it's important to know that today we will cover crisis, but I want to make sure that it's important to play offense with your reputation, okay? So Warren Buffett is one of my favorite quotes because it really speaks to the industry that we serve here. And Warren Buffett knows a few things about a few things. I think he's 175 years old this year, so he's been around for a while. But he says it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. If you think about that, you'll do things differently. Now, he sees reputation from an investment standpoint, but he looks at it from not only the profits and losses and the financials, but he looks underneath the hood. What's the organization like? What are the people there? What are the people who are leading? Who's the leadership? What backgrounds do they have? He really wants to understand before he makes any investment of what is the foundational reputation of that company. So this has a lot of different layers and meanings to it, this quote, but it is one of those things where if something does go sideways with your organization, what are you made of? What's the metal of your organization? How can you stave this off, or how can you, as the leadership, as leaders in the communication side as you are, how can you communicate better? Okay? So this next slide is about reputation being everything. Now, we're brought in, our organization's brought in typically when things go sideways, and we want to advocate, let's not do that. Because reputation is really a core function of any organization. It's everything. It's really, the board, the customers, your congregation, your staff, public figures. It's everything what they're saying about your organization, which is essentially everyone, right? And it's an HR issue. It's a social media thing, but it's really a whole broader spectrum here, but it's a foundation of what you're all about. So what are people saying about you? What are they not saying about you? What are their misperceptions or misunderstandings? What's your image? Are you trusted? This is really critical to everything, and it's really now put to the forefront of what for-profit and non-profit organizations should be taking a look at. It is your core DNA, right? So it's really important to know that reputation is at the forefront anymore. Now it's actually an insurable risk too. So I think it's really important to know that we are looking at things from a more broader perspective here. We also want to say that reputation is, our tagline is enhance the reputation that precedes your faith-based organization before a crisis defines it, right? So this is about playing offense versus playing defense. Where can you enhance your reputation? What do you know? Okay? So you don't want to be defined by a crisis, but you want it to be defined by really the core elements of who you are. So just a few facts that I found along the way in preparation for today's meeting here, but I wanted to see what you're up against. And this is generalizing in a big way, but I found two credible organizations, Lifeway and Gallup. You probably heard of the Gallup poll. I have not heard of the Lifeway research before. But trust in church as an institute remains low by historical standards, right? And again, this is from the Lifeway research. It says about 36% of U.S. adults say they have a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in the church. It's up slightly, but it's really well below the mid-20th century levels. And the Gallup poll said there's a bit of long-term decline here. Confidence in churches and organized religion once exceeded 65% in the 1970s, but it's dropped well below the 30s in recent years. Now, the why behind that, I'm not going to speak to that. And it's more lines of what you're up against, right? There's trust issues here. There are systemic questions, and that really speaks to the reputation side of what you're up against. And a couple of different other things, the perceptions of clergy and religious leaders. Now, just again, don't kill the messenger, but I'm just going to share what I learned here, but ethics and honesty ratings have fallen significantly. In the Gallup poll here, it says that Americans say clergy have a very high ethic has dropped to 56% to about 30% today, which is one of the largest declines amongst professions. And that's a significant shift from the 2000s to today. And then trust in pastors specifically hit record lows. Fewer than 1/3 of Americans rated pastors are as highly honest or ethical in recent polls. Now, is this true? Is this right? Well, I'm not here to debate it or litigate it, but the the stats from here, from what we learn, is that you're up against a pretty big mountain of trust and perceptions. Okay. So this is where the participation comes into play. I'd love to get your thoughts on this because I've done some research myself, but I want to hear from you. What are the top reputation or trust issues you're facing within your religion or faith-based organization in 2026? What's going on now? So what I'm asking here is if you can maybe either write it down or put it into chat for the next, 20, 30 seconds. What are those reputational trust issues that you're up against? Okay, so I do this because I want to juxtapose what we found just on a quick little AI search to what you're hearing. Okay, so just jot some ideas down, maybe put them in the chat so I can hear from you. Okay. And don't be shy. All right. So thank you, Andrew, for trust of government. True. Very much so. Sex abuse and scandals. Absolutely. See, fringe elements of faith defining our faith to others, such as secret lives of Mormon wives. Yes. Misperceptions. So as you're thinking about this, I think it's important to just kind of know what you're up against here, right? And what I did is I simply asked our friends from an AI tool. I said, hey, AI, what are the top reputation or trust issues religions, faith-based organizations are facing in 2026? That's just, fairly simple question. This is what it came up with. And I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well. But erosion of trust and moral authority was number one. Abuse and misconduct scandals. And political and cultural polarization, which we just brought up. So thank you, Andrew, for that. Shifting religious identity and relevancy narratives. Anti-Semitism and interfaith perception challenges. Interfaith institutional credibility issues. Digital misinformation and AI-related risks. And that's becoming more prevalent, and I'll share with a little bit more later on the AI side that we're dealing with, especially more locally to our church. And then regulatory and state society tensions. So are these right? Did something bubble up here that you're like, oh yeah, that's correct, or ooh, I question that? Are there anything on here that you feel compelled to share that popped up from our friends at AI? Yeah, thanks for participating. That's all that a general drop in religious followings, trust is eroded in leadership across all types of organizations and industries. True. Okay. Well, I just want to get level set here as far as what we're up against, okay? So it's time to play some offense. So play some offense with your reputation. And as I mean by that is to really understand what is it we can do to put our ear to the ground, be better stewards of our message, be better champions from a communication side, from a marketing side, and understand what you're up against. But to be, you can always control your communications. You can control what you can do to improve, enhance, and advance your message. And so I'll give you some tips along the way here. So put together this steward framework, and that is intentionally STEWARD. So I'll break these down, and for the most part, it's spirit of transparency, timely communication, empowering your team. So it's not just you as the communicators here, but empowering your team, walking the talk with integrity, accountability structures, restoring trust, and discipleship through a crisis, which is very hard. So let me break these down for you, unpack these a few more. So the first one here is a spirit of transparency. Now, this is really important to be committed to being transparent, not opaque, but very open to what's actually happening, honest, and clarity in words and actions. We put down here, trust grows when leaders share information proactively rather than defensively, especially during difficult moments. Now, it's very hard because you don't necessarily know all the information, but we'd rather be in control of that message during difficult times as opposed to playing defense, playing offense. So we've heard this information, we're aware of it, here's our perspective of it, here's our point of view. Being transparent, not to be shying away from it. The T in Steward is timely communications. Silence creates speculation. Silence is one of those things where if you don't say anything, information is going to be filled pretty quickly. So you might as well get ahead of it and share information along the way. So effective reputation stewardship requires responding quickly with truth, compassion, clarifying before others define that narrative for you. Now, we can't control that, what's being said. That's freedom of speech. We want to listen to those discussions. But it's important from your organization to be ahead of it and provide ongoing, prompt information as it's offered from your organization. The E is empower your team. Now, this is a team organization, not just a one person. Now, you're probably tasked with this as being the spokesperson or the one point of contact for your organization. But reputation is not just owned by leadership alone. It's really equipping everyone to clarify, for the clergy, the staff, the volunteers. We recently did this with my own church. We did what we call message unity training to want to make sure that everyone's unified with the message. Who are we? What's our overarching North Star of our organization? Is everyone aware of that? Yes, we put it on our website, but can we share this? Can we all be singing from the same song page, the same hymnal, if you will, to make sure that everyone's as close to unified about your messaging as possible? That goes a long way, because outside of your congregation or wherever you are worshiping, if someone asks you, where do you go to church, where do you worship, what are you all about, isn't something that you just kind of throw in, to couple together. There's some paraphrasing going on, but it's important maybe that you give everyone the tools they need, the language that they need to communicate accordingly. Now, walk the talk, I should say, with integrity, is offering that credibility. It's built when beliefs align with your behavior, right? So saying and doing are two different things, as I like to tell my kids, my teenage kids. But it's important to say, hey, what are you saying and are you doing? Are you, going to work on time? Do you get your information? Do you get your schoolwork done? I'm using my kids part here, but similarly with the faith-based, we want to protect your reputation by consistently living your standards, your values, privately and publicly. The little things are the big things. So make sure that everything universally is well renowned. Now, this is something predominantly the corporate world deals with on the issues. I can't say from you, but I have a gut feeling that you probably do this pretty well. You walk the talk. But as far as a framework in general, it's always good to make sure that there's integrity along the way. And then accountability structures. Healthy organizations establish clear governance, ethical oversight, and mechanisms for correction. Now, it's one of the things where you probably have a board of directors or a council of sorts, but having them to take a look at your reputation. What's being done? Are we walking the talk? Are our missions are reinforced on a regular basis? I encourage you to take a look at this on at least a yearly basis to see how are we doing? What is our reputation? What's being said? What's not being said? Can we juxtapose between what we say and what we hear, and asking, within the organization, outside the organization, what's being said? Okay, so that's really the accountability structure I'm talking about. And then restoring trust. Sometimes trust is damaged, as we mentioned and outlined a few of the reputational issues. that you're up against a pretty big mountain to climb here. But now we're in a position of restoring trust. Now, are you to blame? No. Is your faith-based organization, are you to blame? I don't know. But in general, you should in a way be always in the world of restoring trust, right? Acknowledging, repenting, and any different actions that can be taken to make sure that you're listening and you're restoring that really important belief and trust that you have with the people who attend your place of worship, okay? And you're probably thinking, hey, Casey, where's the D when it comes to the framework? Well, I'm glad you asked. This is discipleship through crises. So it's kind of leading up here, is that crises do happen. It could be small, it could be big, but crisis is a funny word. Crisis doesn't necessarily have to be too alarming, something that would be so monumental that it could really hurt your organization. But some small crises turn into big things. The trust that people have, or you lose a pastor or someone within your organization, and then it becomes a small crisis. What happens? What you do address it correctly? So taking action, shaping that culture, demonstrating authentic discipleship to both internally and externally audiences. And why I mention reputation and crisis, most people think it's reputation is an outside the organization's issue, but typically we'd like to take an inside-out approach to this communications, meaning that how are we doing internally from the councils, the board, or whomever, to within the staff, right, or within your congregation, or outside the four walls. So it's more of a flow of how a crisis or an issue is being handled, being addressed, being listened to. Okay, so that's the steward framework to play offense. And I'll pause there because I do I'm doing a lot of talking, which communicators do. But are there questions? Certainly welcome any questions you have before we go into the defensive side. If not, I'll keep on rolling. Okay. All right.
I do have questions, but I think
please,
they'll be
Rich.
better given later.
Okay.
It's not exactly about the steward framework. So
fair enough. Good. All right. So now we're going to play some defense. And as a linebacker, this is what I like to do, but we want to make sure that we are doing it in an efficient, effective manner here. But how do you play defense with your reputation? Because today's crises are happening everywhere. The persecution of religious beliefs, right? Or some places are just not getting people into the doors. What are the issues? We're not seeing the traffic we once did in some places. In some places we are, right? We have, let's be real, a country divided on religious beliefs and or political beliefs. It is what it is, and they somehow are connected with religion. How do you address that? The economy affects everyone, definitely with the organizations and churches that we go to and spots that are people donating now. Are they giving back to their church? Are they offering endowments to them? Those numbers probably fluctuate depending on who you ask. But the economy is always a thing, right? And then security, cybersecurity issues, or security of data and the trust that you've established. This is a crisis for everyone, and deep bait can go into this as well. I bring this up because one example of this recently, and I'll go without naming the name of the church, but we had our priest sent out a note to the whole congregation asking them for financial support and giving information, but it wasn't really from our priest. It was a scam. It was a pretty big scam. You probably have heard this before, but it ultimately really hurt the trust of our organization, even though we can say this wasn't from them. It really did. Any newsletter that came after this breach of trust, or any communication that was non-verbal, certainly had a question of authority. And it hurt us financially. It hurt the credibility behind it. But it wasn't our fault, but we had to address it. So it's a crisis, right? Small as it might have been, it had some enduring long-term effect of the trust. And we put on here active shooters. Now, it seems extreme of sorts, but we are in a world of, especially in the country of the United States, that guns are pretty prominent. And there's active shooters, they're going into places of worship. So, hate to say it, and I don't want to be Debbie Downer today, but there's crisis, right? So now, how are we going to handle this? So I want to ask you as well, just to jot down, so get into this mindset of crisis. What are 3 potential or realistic crises regarding your faith-based organization that really keep you up at night? Now, you don't have to provide it for me, but I want you to write this down primarily because what would happen if? Right? What would happen if? What would happen if a crisis did hit your organization today? Would you be prepared? Would you be, how would you communicate toward it? Now, I'm not advocating for, all hands on deck here, but I think I want to make sure that for our purposes today, in showing leadership in the times of the most troubling times, is are you prepared? Now, you're not going to necessarily be pinged for the crisis itself, but potentially you are going to be judged by how you handled it. And that's really what we find in any organization that we deal with, is not the crisis, but how you handle it. The leadership, the communications or lack thereof. We like to say that crisis management is 99% preparation and 1% execution. It's a fun stat that we throw out there, but it emphasizes that the preparation for any crisis management is key. Are you prepared? What would happen if, right? So as you wrote down those 3 crises that potentially, small or big or large or whatever, are you prepared for this? And are you able to manage it from a communication side? So I'll provide a little bit of snapshot here, and we only have about 20 minutes left or so, so I'm going to go by this pretty quickly, and it's a lot to inform you in a small amount of time, but you'll get the gist, okay? So I'm going to call it lightning round for how to handle a crisis, okay? So expectations are that, it's going to be a lot of information in a small amount of time, but if you have any questions about it afterwards, please let me know, okay? So one of the things I want to share here is the top 5 mistakes faith-based organization leaders make during a crisis. They're silent. They delay responses. We'll wait and see, or we're not sure if this is an issue yet. And instinctively, I understand, but I don't advocate for. If something does happen, it's important to say we're investigating the information, or we're gathering more insights, or we just learned about this ourselves. When information becomes available, we'll let you know. But what we see is sometimes silence or delayed responses is ultimately going to hurt you. So I advocate toward making sure that once you hear about something, whatever the crisis is, you communicate that you're aware of it, okay? Another 2 is over-spiritualizing the crisis instead of owning it, meaning you want to say that there was something else, or someone else is at fault, or blaming, or to that end. But I think it's important to take ownership if it's indeed your issue, right? Because with anything, guilt and or responsibility go. If it's your responsibility, your church's responsibility to take ownership, right? And to make sure that you're which goes into the 3, defensiveness instead of humility. And you've seen this before probably, Blake, when someone is being defensive or coming off defensive or really 100% take ownership, it's almost as if they haven't really learned anything from it. If indeed, again, the crisis is at all to blame on your end. And then another mistake here is the lack of internal alignment before going public with information. Are you guys aligned with how you're going to communicate this? Is it one person sharing one information, someone else sharing something else, or something that you might be communicating as a spokesperson to something that might be putting online? Just make sure there's some alignment along the way. I think it's really important to make sure that there is some continuity behind that. And then really what you want to do is focus on institutional protection over the human impact, because human impact is really important here, but you want to make sure that you're protecting, the entity, the sanctity of the organization as well. So it's a nice balance between, providing who you are, going back to what you're all about, your framework, your policies or procedures, and who you are as a faith-based organization. Okay, so there's just a few things that we see as mistakes during a crisis. And then just an idea here that employees in church can forgive bad news, but they do not forgive being left in the dark. Okay. So have a crisis response plan. Now, as communicators, I would hope you would appreciate this, but it's important to have having this in play. There's typically two things here on a crisis plan. One's designed to fix the problem, whatever the crisis is, and the other one's designed to communicate to the problem. Depending on the size of your organization, they're probably sometimes using the one, but I think it's important to know that there's two here. One's fixing whatever the issue is, and the other one's communicating toward that end, because the leadership might be into the fix-it problem, or they might be the designated for the communication side. But it's important to know that there's really two teams going on here when a crisis does happen, because sometimes they interbleed with each other and it becomes a little more confusing, all right? Because of what ultimately the audience wants to know is that you're aware of it, you're taking care of it, and we're going to move on from it, right? And so fixing the problem as quickly as possible, whatever it is, or understanding it further, is half the battle, but then from there to bridge it to the communication side, okay? And having that task force. Who is that task force? Now, this might be a huge undertaking for a small faith-based organization, but let's identify 1, 2, 3, 5 people here. And what this looks like is, having someone who leads the charge, someone who's going to be talking internally to the congregation, and then someone designated externally, talking to volunteers or donors or supporters, right? Maybe someone who's tasked with communicating to the community and the vendors. And then let's also throw some insurance into the mix here too. Sometimes left forgotten is the legal or the insurance groups. All right, I put insurance because sometimes you are insured by a lot of different damage that might happen, depending on the crisis, but also legal. You want to have any missteps legally on what you say and how you say it. So it's important, if you do have legal representation, now's a good time to identify them on your task force. Okay. And what are your policies and procedures? Does your organization have staff, facilities, and guidelines and procedures when a crisis happens? Typically, no, right? And it's important to know that developing these types of things, and this probably has its own hour discussion as far as what those are, but what are policy and procedures when that proverbial crisis does happen? What are you going to do, right? And then test those procedures and train. It's important to have this done ahead of time. And then simulate these crises. Who's doing what? Who's responsible for doing the communications? Who's responsible for fixing the problem? And going back to that offense versus defense side, let's make sure that who is your team and what are they responsible for when you are in the field of battle. So I'm going to end here by going back to the steward framework, but with a different kind of hat on here on the crisis side. It's more of lines of, now that you're going to be playing offense with this steward framework, let's play some defense with it. Okay. So the S here is lead with truth, not spin. Lead with truth, not spin. Again, I don't have a problem. I have faith in you that you would do this because of the organizations you are, but it's important to know that you want to be as truthful and forthcoming as possible. Can't emphasize that enough. It's really, after the crisis happens, the question most people have is, did we provide enough clarity during the fog of war, is what I like to call a crisis. And it's important to make sure that you are offering as much details and insights as possible. And acknowledging what is known and what isn't. And then, again, rejecting defensiveness and secrecy. And really model your humility publicly. We own this and we are addressing it. Right? Now's not time to go to the side and not be transparent or be scared of what might happen, but to own it or at least be in front of it before it happens. So the spirit of
So,
transparency.
so Casey, we did actually have a question in the chat
Please.
about the transparency aspect, right?
Yes.
So Anne Marie says, would you say more about this? Would you talk more about this? Um, when working through a crisis that involves a disagreement between the organization and an authority that has been brought to the public. She says, having worked for my organization through such a crisis, we were advised that if you want to work with the opposition, so whoever is the accusing party, I guess, to reach a real solution, don't put everything out in the media, even though the media consistently offered us a platform for speaking about our position. Um, so, so where's the balance there between wanting to be transparent with the public, but still wanting to come to a compromise with whoever is the opposition or whoever is making those claims.
Yeah, I love this question. So thank you for even addressing it. Now I'll do my best to unpack it because it's nuanced, right? It's important to whatever the situation you're alluding to here. But when I talk about transparency, I think it's important to know your audience. Who is your who in all this? Who is your audience that you need to be transparent to? And while being transparent may mean in your mind that we have to be transparent to the general public and to the media, I would advocate to say your audience internally or to the opposition is important. You don't necessarily need to share all this nuanced information with the public or the media, but it's important to address whoever the audience is, the core audience on all this, being forthcoming and offering them details or having that conversation or open-ended questions to that end. So that's important just to know between transparency of the audience versus the general transparency. Oh, we got this and this is what we know. It's a right sizing the communications, if that helps. Okay. So thank you for that. And it's sensitive information. Obviously, when you want to be on the HR side, or legalities certainly can't be too transparent because there might be some ramifications here. But I want to emphasize the being opaque or non-transparent means you're allowing this vacuum to be filled with other voices and narrative and dialogue without hearing from you first. Okay, the full transparency, that's maybe the question mark, right? to what you're asking, and I hope that helps. The T for timely, make sure again that the timeliness, I've already shared this a little bit, but we are aware and assessing and designate a spokesperson. One point of contact is really important to all this. It's important that there's, if it does go public or you understand the internal and external side of it all, it's nuanced, but make sure that you are timely in those communications through one person, so there's no multiple voices happening if possible. And then timely is not only a one-stop shot, like, oh, we were aware of it, but then never communicate, but provide ongoing communications when appropriate, when there's meaningful information to share with your audience about what's going on, beyond just the first statement. Okay. I alluded to this earlier, but it's a good lead behind. Our approach to anything when it comes to crisis is taking an up, inside out approach to this, different things here. And so unpacking this a little further here is up is when you are designated to communicate, up is in a sequence, cascade of communications, is make sure that the board or your leaders or council is notified of the situation first. And then legal as well, and then your staff. I'm using congregation as a catch-all, but within inside your organization, right? And then your vendors and partners, because they might play a role in what's going on within your congregation, or it's going to be your community. And then the community and other churches or other nearby faith-based organizations, and then media and social media. Now, you see that media and social media are last, right? And that's by design. No disrespect, because I'm a recovering journalist, but I think it's important to know that you are doing you're doing yourself a service to make sure you're controlling that narrative, to make sure that this prioritized list of folks are notified of what's actually happening. So it's this up, inside, out, which helps give you some navigation on communication, okay? So as opposed to the media's knocking on your door, we need to make sure that we are communicating to them. We'll get to you. Yeah, maybe here's a holding statement, but we want to make sure that the folks up above and inside know what's going on first, okay?
So since you mentioned up,
Yes.
and it actually probably goes with the next question as well. There was another question in the chat about um, managing up when either your higher ups, well, the question in the chat was if your higher ups think that something's a crisis and you're like, it might not be a crisis, right? Like, how do we manage that relationship? But it's also if they think something's not a crisis and you're like, no, this is really important. We have to get on this, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do we work on that relationship? We are generally pretty much, middlemen between the public and our higher ups, right? So like,
Right.
how do we manage that relationship going up to say either yes, this is a crisis when they think it's not, or no, this isn't a crisis when they think it is?
Yeah, God, another good question. Y'all are great. Um, I would answer that by saying, write down what are those crises, right? And kind of talk through with your up to say, what would we do if this happens? And where can we, I don't know, where would we fit this into a crisis? Would we maybe even color code the crisis? Meaning, it's red, it's all hands on deck, it's, 5 alarm fires, whatever you want to call it. This is a crisis that would require, this form of communications, right? How would we handle this? Who's going to be doing the communications? Another color would be orange. Now, it could escalate to a red, but right now it's manageable. How do we handle this? We make sure we right size the communication to the right people. Or if it's a yellow, I'm just throwing colors out there, but yeah, if it's a yellow, it's very cautionary. There's a storm potentially brewing, but we don't necessarily need to communicate. Perhaps we should. I'm not sure. Maybe we need to let folks know about this. What is the protocols internally? So in a way, you are put it upon yourself to develop this crisis before it happens, right? And seeing how you would handle it and asking leadership what would be the process and procedures, okay? You don't want to wait till the fog of war during the crisis to find out, what is right and what's wrong. Right now is a good time during a calm to ask those questions, okay? So that would be my best response to that. And then empower your team, within, some degrees of aspect here. You want internal trust fuels external credibility. You want to brief your staff and key volunteers, make sure kind of up, inside, out piece that they are equipped, because nothing worse than if a crisis does happen and you hear about it through media or social media first, and then internally you're unaware of what's happening. So to have folks at least talking points or some degree of clarity on the situation, you're really equipping them with narrative, clarity, and maybe even what's next, or even a call to action during a crisis. It's really important to empower your team with this information, right? Encouraging, your leaders to be, to take care and be operational in your response, to be very surgical here, to make sure that we are all unified in approaching this, because nothing worse than a scatter shot. No one knows what's happening, and everyone's having 20 different messages going on. But to centralize the situation, make sure there's some degree of clarity. Now, the spokesperson who's going to be leading this probably has more insights and information that they're going to provide on a regular basis, but the team itself should not be left in the dark. Is the takeaway from this. Again, we talked about walk the talk, and I don't necessarily have any issues with you all, but just make sure that everyone ensures that the actions are stated values, avoid over-promising, demonstrate repentance through behaviors, not just words. Just, that you tackle the crisis with a high level of integrity. Again, things you probably won't have any issues with. Accountability. Trust grows where oversight is visible, right? And use independent review when appropriate. Clarify governance roles. Who's doing what, and make sure that there's a pecking order of sorts, and that you're documenting big decisions or processes. And this may go to the question that was just asked, but maybe if you do simulate a crisis and you find some gaping holes or some vulnerabilities, or boy, what would you if? I think it's important to document that or to address it. And what would the process be like, all right? Because you don't want to be judged by this during the fog of war. You want to be having those conversations earlier so you can understand the accountability and shore up those important decision-making processes well before it happens. Okay. The R is restoring trust. After something does happen, you want to apologize. You want to go back to prioritize the victims and impacted communities and communicate progress over time. Now, a crisis typically is just a moment in time, right? It happened. You may be defined by it for a little bit, but immediately, as much as possible, you want to restore that trust and saying, we learned from it, we heard it from it, we gathered as much information about it, but darn it, we're not going to have that happen again, or if it does, we're going to be better stewards of it, right? So restoring trust immediately following it, not that, whew, that's done, we'll need to deal that again. No, now's the time to take a breath, but saying, what did we learn? How can we be better, okay?
Can you go back
please.
one step? Sure. It was actually a question came in that was pretty prescient right before you hit that slide. The question was, what metrics or signals do you watch to know whether trust is actually being rebuilt? Right? Like we can do things that we think are going to restore trust, but what are you looking at to know if that's actually restoring trust?
Yeah, good. So a couple different mechanisms to do so. It really is a time frame is a big question mark, but is to maybe survey. Survey internally or externally, how did we do? What did you learn from it? Gather insights of vulnerabilities, or ask questions, even a focus group, to gauge how damaging or not damaging the crisis was. You can gut check it, but if you get some candid feedback from either internally or externally of what that situation is, you can determine, did this have a lasting impression of us? Did it really hurt us? Or was it a big, what they call nothing burger? Is there something there? So you can ask questions post-mortem to see what kind of damage this was done. And that could be done through either a survey or focus group, or ask one-on-one questions to kind of gauge, did we lose something? Did we lose something in all this? Or did we do a pretty good job and actually gain their trust, right? It's not always a negative sum game on a crisis. Perhaps your leadership stepped up during the most troubling of times and you look pretty good. So I would ask questions after the fact. Maybe not like the day after, but certainly within a week or a month after the fact. Okay. Great questions. And then just being respectful of time here, the last one is, discipleship through crisis. Crisis becomes a formation when led well, right? Biblical or just whatever your religious beliefs are, go back to your core substance of who you are, right? And frame every moment of spiritual growth and not just a damage control. And what do we learn from all this? Who are we becoming through this? When you lose, don't lose the lesson. The great Nelson Mandela said, I never lose. I either win or I learn. I either win or I learn. And so it's one of those things where you're always going to learn from all these different situations. Did you lose? Well, maybe you lost some trust, maybe you lost some capabilities, but I think you can learn more than anything else. So it's important to know that it's not necessarily a fully defining moment, but you can learn from it. Okay. So the great Winston Churchill says, when you're going through hell, keep going. And it's one of those things where it's sometimes very challenging, and it seems like forever a crisis takes place, but it's a moment in time, and having these types of preparations ahead of time makes it feel more comfortable or natural, or we've seen this before, you feel more ready for the game, right? So, but during that fog of war, it is torture because you're almost thinking about it constantly, but you will get through it and you will shine on the other side of it. And again, one of my other favorite quotes is from JFK that the Chinese use two brushstrokes to write the word crisis. One brushstroke stands for danger and the other for opportunity. So in a crisis, beware of the danger, but recognize there's opportunity on this. Okay, so it doesn't always have to be negative. Right? So that is all. I wanted to say thank you, and thank you for all the questions, but I am here to whatever you guys would want me to be to answer any questions. I again went through a lot of information quickly, but I hope this was beneficial.
So I just have one summary question before we say goodbye,
Sure.
because we are pushing up on the hour. Um, Distilling your presentation down, what are the top three things we can either start doing or initiate doing today, in your opinion?
Yeah, from an offensive side, I think it's important to know what is your current reputation, right? So assess your reputation, not negative side, but just more lines of what are people saying inside and outside. So asking questions, and this can be done through either a survey or a focus group, but to really understand what's being said about your organization, right? So assessing, I call it an MRI. Where are there, if you're going to a doctor, right, you want to find out where the issue is, but ask a lot more questions. So that's an assessment. The second would be to have a crisis plan in play. And this is mostly on the communication side, but I think it's important to know, who is going to be doing what and when, and then asking these questions well ahead of time, right? And then the third part here, Ryan, I had to think this out. I'll probably second guess myself afterwards, but my third part is to simulate a crisis. Are those ones that you wrote down or ones that are realistic in your world, big or small? What are they? And loose ball those, right? And throw those out there. What would happen if this happened to us, right? Even there may be a faith-based organization down the street or across the country to happen to them, but what would happen if it hit us? Would we be ready to go? And might as well do it to yourself, right? And to learn from it.
That's awesome. Well, Casey Boggs, thank you so much for this presentation today. It was absolutely fantastic. A wonderful hour of information and very, very useful information. As noted in the chat, our next professional development webinar will be held on February 24th, which is Beyond the Pitch, a real conversation about journalists and PR collaboration of the RCC and RNA. We are doing this together with the Religion News Writers Association, and we are very, very excited about the upcoming webinar on February 24th. So once again, Casey, thank you so, so much. And we appreciate your time and good luck with the rest of your speaking opportunities in Atlanta.
All right, thank you. Bye
Thank
now.
you. Thank you. You're great.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Casey.
Thank you.
I did want to ask you, Ryan, this was recorded. Is it going to be available?